Okay, now what Kant is claiming with the kingdom of ends is that we should all, by the use of these rational principles, because reason is something we all share, be able to come to the same moral judgments. There should not be a distinction between what I think is correct and what you think is correct based on these rational principles. Right? So he lays it out towards the end of your text, and this is in your notes here, that there are three qualities that all formulations of the categorical imperative share. First, they share a form which consists in universality, and in this respect, the formula of the moral imperative is expressed thus, Kant claims. Maxims must be so chosen as if they were to hold as universal laws of nature. And this element is emphasized in the first formulation of the categorical imperative, but holds for all three, claims Kant. Secondly, a matter, that is, an end. And here the formula says that rational beings, inasmuch as he is by his very nature an end, and hence an end in himself, must serve in every maxim as a condition limiting all merely and relative and arbitrary ends. Right? So that's the second formulation encapsulated. But nonetheless, what Kant wants to claim is that the second point is contained already in the first. Now third, right, he points out a complete determination of all maxims by the formula that all maxims proceeding from his own legislation ought to harmonize with a possible kingdom of ends as a kingdom of nature. Now, in this number three, what it really seems like is just going back to check our math, right? Now, what Kant seems to be doing is trying to create sort of a rational scientific means for determining the moral value of our actions, right? First, we should universalize the maxim of our actions and make sure that it can hold as a moral law for all. Second, we ought to make sure that we're not using anybody merely as a means to our ends, but giving them their full dignity and full value as a rationally self-determining entity, as an end in themselves. Right? And then thirdly, right, he claims that the maxims proceeding from his own legislation, so those coming from one, ought to harmonize with the possible kingdom of ends as a kingdom of nature. Right? So all of those actions proceeding from one ought to harmonize with two. Now, this seems like Kant is just saying, well, don't just stop at the first formulation of the categorical imperative, you still need the second, so make sure they are in harmony with one another. Right? It seems that way. But he's actually saying something a little bit more here. Right? What he is saying is that, we can take a situation in which we can universalize the maxim of our actions and will it to be universal moral law and get a yes or no answer. Right? And we can get a yes or no answer to whether we are treating people as ends in themselves or merely just as a means. But what about those situations where we get yes to the one and no to the other? Right? Here's my favorite example. When I was working for a store, a lady came back to return an expensive University of Windsor sweater. And she had clearly, this was a child sweater, and it's one of those exceedingly expensive ones. Right? It had clearly been washed, it wasn't even a style that we carried anymore and that sort of thing. So, universalizing the maximum of my actions, I said, no, store policy is, I can't take this back. But I was also teaching Kant at the time and decided to go through the whole gamut, right? And ask myself if I'm treating her as a means to my retail ends or if I'm giving her the full dignity she deserves as a rational being worthy of respect and dignity. Right? The answer was no. Right? So, in the first case, I had to say, no, buy something or get out. In the second case, right, I have to help this lady. It seems that I've got a contradiction. Right? In order to treat her as an end in herself and do my job properly, something must be added. Right? So these two formulations of the categorical imperative have to harmonize with one another in such a way as to produce a morally good action in order to ensure that my actions accord with duty. So what did I do? Well, I asked more questions. University of Windsor is on the west side of Windsor. Public transit kind of sucks there. And she got as a gift this University of Windsor sweater for her son, who is now outgrown it. She cannot afford a new University of Windsor sweater at like $60 or something like that, right? But she also can't get out to cheaper stores. So what did I do? Told her, well, I'm off in about half an hour. If you wait around, I'll spin you out to a used clothing store where for $2 you can get a new sweater for your son that'll fit. Right? And then I'm coming back to the West End after. I can drop you off. Right? So in this manner, what Kant is doing is asking that we do something more than just check our math. Right? We don't just get a question mark if the first two formulations don't agree. He demands that we harmonize our actions, right, between 1 and 2. So in this manner, the third formulation of the categorical imperative, the kingdom of ends, requires something more of us. Right? So that, in a nutshell, is Kant.